day 6 of our investigation, and while some might say it's always darkest before the dawn, I can't help but feel right now we are trapped in a permanent midnight with nothing but darkness and despair laying ahead. I mean, at this point in the story, we've already had multiple suicides, multiple kidnappings, a shooting, the tragic death of a young girl, and the knowledge that there is a fairly large drug cartel existing within the town selling a somewhat out-of-date hallucinogenic drug. To top it all off, our main catalyst for even joining this investigation, finding Emma, is still very much at a dead end because our one sole lead, Isabella, well, she's still in a coma after that shooting. And the other two leads, Bonehead and Sandman, are still kind of in the wind, so yeah, things are looking pretty bleak. Even our stalwart forest warlock, Cohen, is out of commission right now. But that does make me think there could be more to the forest. And it seems my suspicions might have been correct. Because unexpectedly, the forest is back to being off limits. Now, this is obviously a bit strange because we didn't notice anything inherently dangerous out there when we were stumbling around at 10 or 11 at night. And the officer on duty here also has no idea either. All he knows is that Sheriff Morgan told him to close off the entrance. Deputy's assumption is, there could possibly be another bear prowling around out there. I guess it does kind of work out for us that Sheriff Morgan is here, and we can maybe get some more information out of him. Though the first thing that immediately is on his mind is the fact that Kathy was out looking actively for that hallucinogenic drug. Now, at this point, we know that she had that dysfunctional home life that easily could have led her to try to seek some escape from reality with that hallucinogen. But we also learned from that letter last night that she was actively coordinating with Emma to do something other, which at this point I'm fairly certain has something to do with that Native American death ritual. If anything, though, Morgan, for all of his naivete, still doesn't really understand that surface level impression of Kathy that everybody seemed to have was definitely not the way Kathy was. Also, while we've been able to kind of piece together the fact that maybe both of them were trying to actively perform this ritual, Matthew doesn't seem to be 100% sold on that idea just yet, and I think from a discussion we might have had yesterday with Morgan, he isn't really too familiar with the death ritual either way. And yeah, there was the mention in Emma's diary in regards to the fact she wasn't really trying to do the drugs that Kathy had procured, so it definitely wasn't just the drugs themselves that brought them together. But yeah, still the greater question is just why the forest is off limits again. And it turns out the reason for that is rather odd. It's because Cohen just absolutely insisted, which seems... it seems odd that he would, close off the forest, or even that he would have the authority to do so. As far as we know at this point, he was merely volunteering to look over the upkeep of the forest, not really that he was the end-all, be-all, authority over the forest. And true to form, Morgan really doesn't have any idea why Cohen would have wanted him to close off access to the forest. He assumes, there could be another bear. Especially after the bear attack that Kathy had suffered from, even though the greater tragedy there is still the dysfunctional home life and attempted murder that Father Barton had tried to do to her. If anything, though, if there is a bear out there, Nas is probably the best guy to handle that, and I'm sure he'll be out here to start patrolling the forest in Cohen's stead. And since we already kind of showed ourselves to be, adept at using a gun and fighting criminal mastermind bears, we are given somewhat free access to enter the forest as long as we talk to the deputy on duty here. So it does really work out that we did, fight that bear earlier on that second day. And Morgan does recommend that maybe we should go check up on Cohen at the hospital. I mean, even though Samuel did kind of deflect us last night, they should have normal visiting hours now. So, with this one last final prod from Sheriff Morgan, I feel like our next avenue of investigation should be back at the nearby hospital. Though before I head directly over to Cohen's room, I do want to make a quick side trip to talk to Dr. Samuel a bit more. I mean, there's still a number of topics that I want to cover with him, such as, what happened with Cohen and what's his current, physical state. First, though, he does want to do a little bit more investigation in regards to Dennis's mysterious suicide yesterday. I mean, to me, it's still a bit questionable, just the fact that, of whether or not it was a suicide. And to go along with my continued suspicion of that, it doesn't really give me a whole lot of, trust in Dr. Samuel's prognosis here about the fact that it actually was a suicide. Because what he presents as evidence, well, it's still pretty tenuous, because first and foremost, he is not a medical examiner. As far as I can tell, he's not a mortician. No, not a mortician. I guess medical examiner would probably be the best person for that. But yeah, the evidence that's presented here is pretty much what Sheriff Morgan said. They found a gun in his hand, a bullet in his head, and a suicide note nearby. It seems like an open and shut case to, a very baseline level. But, from having watched so many episodes of Case Closed, I feel like there's some other stuff that can be looked into, such as gunpowder residue on, the sleeves, the point of entry for the actual bullet, just a number of things that, I feel like a medical examiner would be better suited to figure out. Along with that, there is also the question of how Isabella is doing. I mean, from what Dr. Samuel said yesterday, we didn't really have too much to worry about. She did lose a lot of blood. She's still unconscious, but she's not in any real danger, medically speaking. It's just still a question of we still have no idea when she's going to be waking up to give us that crucial piece of information to find out where Emma is. And yeah, I'm not really looking to be placated. I just wish we had a more solid idea of when she might be waking up. Also, beyond that, Dr. Samuel goes a rather odd route of thinking here, in that someone's physical attractiveness would kind of prohibit them from selling drugs. And instead of questioning that, Matthew decides to be a bit pedantic about things and say that she wasn't actually the one dealing drugs. She was just the person entrapping people to sell drugs too. So, yeah, I don't know. Obviously there's the fact that Isabella was, ensnared in her own way by Dennis and maybe other parties. But I feel like she maybe could have done more to get out of that horrible, cycle that she was stuck in. Also, interestingly enough, I guess the creation of Epoch is not really all that difficult to do. It seems that, no one has to be a regular Breaking Bad to create this horrible hallucinogenic drug. Especially if you're not making it on a huge scale, even though what we found in that dilapidated bus seemed to say that they were making a whole mess of it. But yeah, all you'd really need to do to make this drug is just have someone with some pharmacological knowledge. Pharmacological. It's a bit of a tongue twister. But yeah, it could very well be that Dennis just knew someone with some pharmacological, expertise, and bada bing, bada boom, you now have an easy way to make a very dangerous drug to sell to impressionable bored youths. And it just so happens that I do happen to know someone in the hospital that does also have this pharmaceutical knowledge that might be of some help to us. And yeah, that person, as you might recall, is old Dr. James here. Thing is that instead of trying to make a further inquiry about other people in town that might have this pharmaceutical knowledge, instead, I think it's good to lay down what we've been able to figure out in regards to why Emma and Kathy might have met out in the forest on the 24th. And it kind of goes back to that original idea I kind of presented when we were, in the forest just a little bit ago, and that's the fact that it very well could be that they were trying to perform that ritual, and it seems that Dr. James was of a similar mindset. And it seems within complete reason, at least to Dr. James, that what he knows about Emma, she very well could have been trying to have a look into the afterlife via this death ritual. The question is, how would she have known how to perform it? I mean, the obvious conclusion I would reach would be Dr. James, the man that knows all about the Native American lore and the area, but he says he never talked to Emma about that during their counseling sessions. And yeah, while we know from the old newspapers that Cougar did try to perform the ritual, it didn't really go too in-depth in regards to that. But Dr. James here does posit the very reasonable possibility that Kathy, who was living in the same place as Cougar, might have been able to find some documents, I guess, outlining the ritual, and that's how she might have learned all about it and given that information over to Kathy. But yeah, there was the fact that Kathy's letter did kind of point out that it was Emma who was inviting her to perform the ritual, not that she had told Emma about the ritual. Still, it could be that overall Emma's general interest in whatever events happened 40 years ago, she might have learned through some other means about this ritual. I mean, for all we know, maybe Barbara did have more information that she had to give about it, and she had presented that to Emma, allowing her to perform the ritual, and just never really stated it to us. But yeah, I mean that's a bit of a mystery, especially considering the fact that up to this point, I think the last thing we heard was that Father Barton had destroyed all the documentation that was still laying around in the church from Cougar. But yeah, I guess it is good to get at least some, I guess, reaffirmation that it does seem pretty likely that the both of them had met in the forest that night to perform this ritual, that, the disillusioned young pastor's daughter who almost got murdered and had nothing left to live for, and the other disillusioned young girl who was very interested in what happened in life after death. Both of them were, I guess, almost willing to join in a suicide pact to forego life and see what lay on the other side. Still, with all that out of the way, we can now finally safely get around to visiting the good old forest warlock Cohen. And outside of a bit of a head injury and just looking a bit haggard, he mostly seems to be doing alright and is in, I would say, almost fairly good spirits. In fact, he doesn't seem to mind at all that we had to break into his house and smash a few windows to get him to safety. Yeah, even Sheriff Morgan tried to get Cohen to make sure he understood that his health is important. But it's not too long before Matthew has to get to brass tacks and figure out just what's the reason for the forest being off limits right now. And while initially Cohen decides to give us what almost feels like cryptic mumbo-jumbo, I feel like if we kind of push a little bit more, we might be able to get what I would almost say a more tangible answer. Because, yeah, this whole, almost psychic link that he seems to have with the forest, that doesn't really fly with me. Just sheer gut feelings of something being wrong. Yeah, we need something a little bit more than that, and I feel like he's almost willing to give it up to us. And while it does take a little bit, I think at this point we've gotten into fairly good graces, being Cohen's friend, that, yeah, he asks us to do a little favor and get an envelope from his house. And I get a strong feeling that this favor he's asking us is kind of opening a door to a much larger truth. And I'm very curious about finding out more about the forest, so I definitely don't mind running this very small errand for him. So with key in hand, let's go ahead and make a quick little side trip back over to Cohen's Lodge to get this mysterious envelope. Also, it's a bit amazing to me that everything is pretty much the exact same way it was last night, especially with a big, large roaring fire in a completely wooden house. That doesn't really scream safety to me. But yeah, that main door is still locked to us, so we do have to venture out to the balcony again to get inside his office. And I still can't help but question where all this authority that Cohen seems to have in regards to the forest comes from. Though this envelope pretty much immediately gives an impression as to where this authority is coming from. that's the U.S. military. Yeah, for some reason or another, they had a pretty, I guess, in-depth interest to the town at large here, and this envelope holds what I feel to be a very large piece of information in regards to that. In fact, looking around this office here, I feel like Cohen was a bit more in-depth in the military than we might have originally assumed. But it's back to the hospital we go to give him the envelope. And a part of me was almost worried that, having handed the envelope over to him, that Cohen would have just immediately rip it up or burn it or maybe even eat it to make sure that no one gets this probably top secret information about Project Mizzurna. But I think since we did not manage to read it or, break his trust in regards to that, he is more than happy to, share some information about this with us. And as you can imagine, Matthew's suspicions regarding the fact that Cohen is still in town overseeing the forest is indeed a direct correlation with this mysterious Project Mizzurna. And while he does have some worries that maybe Cohen won't tell him because it's a highly guarded military secret, in actuality it turns out that if it was a military secret, it's probably no longer been that confidential, probably for 20 to 30 years at this point. But it seems that the reason that Cohen did decide to leave the military and head to Mizzurna Falls was because of this mysterious envelope that he found while he was on a base at Los Alamos in New Mexico, which I think was where they originally did some of the atomic bomb testing, so maybe it's supposed to give some impression that it's supposed to be where all the most top secret information in the military goes. But yeah, after reading what was in the envelope, he found this case from 40 years ago regarding Cougar and the death ritual that the military, for some reason, had a lot of interest in. And we do get to impress Cohen a bit with our in-depth investigative knowledge here. I'm sure he probably expected maybe Morgan to come in here with a lot of useful information, but instead it's the high school kid who knows all about the death journey ritual and, murder mysteries that happened over 4 decades ago. But yeah, from what we already recalled from talking to Barbara on her birthday bash, the military was called in due to the sheriff at the time probably being fairly overwhelmed with the strange murder that happened in town. It seems, though, that the military wasn't in town just to help with investigating the murder. Instead, they were very interested in this ritual. And well, I'm not sure if you're overly familiar with how the U.S. military and as to why they might have interest in things, but it's not really of an altruistic nature. But yeah, it seems that the military decided to hold a lockdown over the forest for quite some time. They held it in almost a stranglehold to continue their investigation into the ritual. And in turn, the reason that, Cohen, being in the military, had some passing knowledge that there could have been a ritual performed in the forest. Well, that's what we've been able to piece together now, because the U.S. military had some, I guess, overt knowledge about this ritual. The problem is that it was yet again just a feeling that Cohen had, and that there was nothing evidence-wise to really point to the Death Journey ritual having occurred in the forest. Except it also strikes us to recall at this point that, after we fought the bear and got the necklace, we never really told Cohen about that, because he had kind of been just knocked the fuck out by that criminal mastermind bear. And now that he has learned about this mysterious necklace, and our short description of it being quote-unquote tribal in nature, that seems to have been that missing piece of evidence that Cohen needed to be 100% certain himself that Death Journey ritual did indeed take place on that Christmas Eve. It appears that this prophet necklace is a pretty pivotal part to the Death Journey ritual. The prophet in question is almost the guide that the dead person needs to get back from the afterlife back to the living, and seems, to be pretty much a cornerstone in the ritual going off without a hitch. And it was pretty much that central figure that we saw back in that mural whenever we took that short little side trip into the cave out in the woods with Sheriff Morgan a couple days ago. But the prophet is able to supposedly suck in the life force of the earth and use that to really channel energy back into the dead person to bring them back to life, I guess. But even if Dr. James was only making a speculative guess, I now feel almost 100% concrete on the nose that the Death Journey ritual was attempted that night, because we have, I guess, pretty much an end-all be-all source here for all things Death Journey ritual related, because now we find out that the U.S. government and the military, I guess, were also fully investigating it and had a whole bunch of knowledge regarding it. And with this newfound knowledge and with, I guess, a corroborating source, definitely seems like something we should fill in to Morgan about, but I feel like we have a whole goldmine of information here that I don't really want to pass up on just yet, so there is still that question about what exactly Project Mizzurna is. I mean, obviously, Mizzurna Falls is the name of the town. I guess it would make sense that Project Mizzurna would be in relation to, the name of the town. But they don't call it Project Mizzurna Falls, they just call it Project Mizzurna. And the reason that is because where the name of the town came from was actually deeply rooted in the Native American, I guess, folklore that, that the people had around here. And it seems that people that indulge in this Death Journey ritual will meet with Mizzurna. And Mizzurna seems to be a reference to some indefinable truth that I guess is supposed to be unlocked once you reach the afterworld, maybe? If anything, though, I guess the military found it pretty snappy and descriptive of what they were trying to investigate here in town with that Death Journey ritual, so that explains the name of Project Mizzurna. But it strikes me that while we've been talking to Cohen here, that, I don't know, this ambient hospital music's probably not the most uplifting thing in the world, and I feel like the song Eternal is usually, somewhat upbeat and kind of rouses some positive, inspirational feelings, so Let's try to play that for Cohen. I mean, we don't really know what Cohen's music taste is, but I feel like Eternal is just kind of a universal song made for anybody. And quite unexpectedly, it strikes a chord with Cohen. Not so much in that it's just an amazing, ethereal song, but it seems to drive home somewhere deeper inside Cohen's very being. And almost, I would say, on the level of divine intervention, the existence of this song, the fact that the singer of the song is right nearby, the fact that this ritual seems to keep happening within the town, it all starts to come together and make a whole lot more sense here because, Cohen has heard this song before from back in the military, whenever he was starting to look more into Project Mizzurna. While the military was investigating the Death Journey ritual, they did uncover not only how the ritual worked, but also some, rather interesting bits of information from the ritual itself, I guess. But I guess you might question why the U.S. military would be so interested in an ancient Native American ritual to bring back the dead or have a post-death experience. And it appears likewise that the military was also trying to find out what happens after you die. Now, I will say that the U.S. military has definitely done some odd investigations into things over times. I mean, there was something like MK Ultra, where they secretly were giving, I think, LSD to troops to see how they would react to that drug. And they've definitely gotten some questionable sources of motivation to try to do some to try to do some experimentation. But the fact that they would investigate a murderer, a well-known mentally unstable murderer who was trying to gain life after death and almost immortality, I don't really see that as something the military would try to indulge in. But as it turns out, the U.S. military, under knowledge of what Cougar tried to do, and I suppose they think he almost obtained, they decided to start almost Frankensteining up corpses to revive them in an attempt to find out what happened, I guess, after you die. And Cohen was a part of that larger investigation. And you might be thinking, well, this sounds massively stupid. I don't see how that could work. Strangely, it was kind of the opposite. Things actually turned out fairly well. The people that came back after dying, they shared their experiences, and things mostly went on a positive note in that regard. And even more strange is the fact that they all seem to share this experience of life after death. And that experience really matches what I think Emma had communicated to Dr. James, as well as the fact that it's pretty much the same experience that I think Isabella communicated to, Emma. And the reason that Cohen knows so much about it is because he has also experienced this life after death. As he recounts here, it was, an ethereal, pleasing, just vast, almost heaven-like place to be. And just no matter where you went, that melody from Eternal just seemed to be playing there. And it's at this point that I feel like the game goes way, way into the supernatural, where it really seems to be indulging in this idea that the forest out in Mizzurna Falls is, maybe on a ley line, maybe has some other supernatural properties, but being there, dying out there, I guess, just allows you magical access to this otherworld plane. And while initially I'd say, being skeptical and realistic that there's no way that, that could exist, the fact that this game presents the idea that all these people are sharing the same exact view of the afterlife, and they're all hearing the same melody, this song of God, that there might just be something more to it. I'd almost say that it would rock Matthew to his very pragmatic core, might make him question everything that he already knows. But he does present a very important, question here. I mean, what's so important about this life after death? I mean, you should be taking more in while you're alive than trying to explore this world after. And sadly, I don't think Cohen has a real good idea. At this point, I think he's more just a guardian of knowledge rather than someone actively trying to explore this afterlife ever again. Especially considering that he does reveal that, the people that were brought back, they had this shared afterlife experience, but there were also a lot of people that just died. And in turn, he questions whether or not they were honestly any better than Cougar. I mean, while the U.S. military wasn't trying to get divine power, they were just trying to get scientific knowledge. At what cost did they do that at? Still, just a whole lot to take in at this point, especially the reveal that there's just a larger government conspiracy that tried to investigate this bizarre afterlife ritual. It's just, I don't know, it's a whole lot to take in. So for right now, I'm going to go ahead and call this a video. Hopefully you'll join me next time as we finish up Day 6. See you then.